Good afternoon from sunny Los Angeles, California. I'm here. This is the first episode of my podcast. It's called Tenorio Isn't Real, because I'm not real, because nothing is real. Maybe some things are real, but certainly not me. There's a lot of people who I don't even know what to say. I really wanted to talk about Top Gun and Top Gun 2 Maverick. I wonder if they'll make a Top Gun 3. I hope they don't make a Top Gun 3. Not that I dislike Top Gun, but I think it's pretty obvious that it's almost a propaganda movie. Tom Cruise is fun. The director of the first one, Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, awesome. Also made True Romance, very eclectic, very awesome director. I think Man on Fire. I didn't see that, but I like to pretend I know a lot about movies, so I'll just say the title. Citizen Kane. There, I proved that I'm a movie guy. But Top Gun is clearly some sort of strange propaganda thing. Isn't it obvious? We spent so many years, movie fans like railing against the Marvel movies or loving the Marvel movies. Now we have a drop off, and I think people are starting to care less and less about them. And then, some people who are against Marvel movies are all happy when Top Gun Maverick came out of nowhere. Made $1 billion or something across the world. And then they were happy as if it's a return to cinema. We did it, everyone. Cinema's back. There's no more Marvel movies because we got Tom Cruise and Top Gun now. But they released Top Gun 40 years ago. And, I don't think, if we had to compare the two Top Guns, I don't want to be that guy who says, oh, Top Gun 1 was so much better than the second one. But it clearly was. The first one was way more character driven. The second one is more character driven. The second one has characters and is like the biggest Boeing advertisement I've ever seen. It's the biggest advertisement for the military you'll ever see in the history of movies. Every other movie but the military is about how awful war is and how scary it could be. People getting killed, everybody dying, your family's torn apart. And Top Gun 2 is about families reuniting over killing people, over the mission, over the military, over flying, over the Air Force. And nobody really talks about it. We are, a year into the war in Ukraine, where, whatever you think about it, whether, Russia is completely at fault for invading Ukraine, or whether you think that NATO really has a lot to do with setting Russia up to invade the Ukraine, I would say the war is crazy. It's a crazy thing in general. But it's not like it gets better. Top Gun 2, let me do a little recap. Top Gun 1 is about Tom Cruise and his co-pilot Goose, and halfway or 3/4 of the way through the movie, Goose dies, leaving behind his daughter, his son, and his wife. Very sad. He gets killed by the cockpit. He flies, they eject from their planes, and he breaks his neck on the cockpit or something, and he dies. At the end of the movie, they fight the Russians, and it's all for Goose. Hooray! But through it, Tom Cruise has this weird little relationship with this girl who he wants to fuck but doesn't fuck. If you've ever heard that Quentin Tarantino bit, him talking about Top Gun being the gayest movie ever, and it's about a man struggling with his own sexuality or something. It's funny. It's an interesting take on the movie because the movie's an interesting movie. That being said, it is also just propaganda. I think Top Gun 1 was, what I read, was one of the biggest influencers for the for people, young men joining the military. I'm sure women did too, but people joining the military. They released Top Gun, and all of a sudden, people wanted to be fighter pilots. The military has a long history in Hollywood, but it doesn't. Top Gun might be the biggest aggressor. It might be the only movie where war has no negative side effects. It doesn't have no negative repercussions in history. War is how it goes. Which I guess, maybe it's weirdly realistic because human beings are almost cursed by war. We can't seem to break out of it. But I think it's mostly because of the money. People always say, oh, maybe humans are just violent animals, which sure we are. There are plenty of violent animals, but it's pretty obvious that it makes a lot of money. And Top Gun 2, it's the craziest movie you've ever seen. It starts off, I don't really know how to feel because I'm not a big CGI fan. And the opening of the movie is Tom Cruise getting in this crazy experimental jet plane and taking it up into near space and breaking this the whatever barrier. But at the same time, it looks like a real jet. I think they let him use a real jet. I think it was real, which is, when Francis Ford Coppola made Apocalypse Now, they got real helicopters and weapons and stuff from the Filipino military and the Filipino government. But this is Raytheon. That was the Filipino government. This isn't the U.S. government, although it obviously has a part in it. This is the biggest weapon manufacturers on the whole planet. The aerospace guys, the guys who continuously keep the war machine going. And he's just flying it in the movie. It's like a movie prop. How is it that a movie prop, people don't look at it and go, wow, where did he get that jet plane? How did Tom Cruise get a jet? Did the studio build one? Did they buy one? Did they ask Raytheon or Boeing, maybe we could use your jet for a little while? No, obviously not. There's no way that this isn't some sort of military industrial complex thing. A lot of people think that these movies are awesome, and they are awesome. You've never seen fucking jets and fucking flying and shooting at each other like this. You've never seen it before. It's amazing. But there's such a difference between this and that Howard Hughes Flying Angels or whatever, where they did have real planes. I guess it's the same thing, just updated. But, they're not quaint little biplanes. They're the highest end military gear that the public knows about. Just think about that for a second. The public wants to know. The public wants to see the fun movies. And we got all these Marvel movies with CGI. I'm not saying they should CGI the planes, but God, nobody really cares. Nobody really has any questions. Nobody has, this is a movie about the military that obviously glorifies the military. And I haven't heard a single person bring it up. All the reviews, all the movie critics, Quentin Tarantino talked about, I don't say this often, but I sure do love Top Gun Maverick. It's propaganda piece. Was it a good movie? I don't know. It was an okay movie. I thought the end was pretty dumb, where Tom Cruise they go on their secret mission in a place that's supposed to be Russia, but isn't. So they didn't say it was Russia, but it's clearly supposed to be Russia. And they're going to do a Death Star type thing where they blow up the whole of a nuclear weapons making facility. And then he gets shot down. Or no. What's his name? I think Miles Teller, who plays Goose's son, who hates Tom Cruise because Tom Cruise didn't want Goose's son to fly anymore, so he kept him out of the military or something. He gets shot down, and Tom Cruise goes to rescue him. Or vice versa. Tom Cruise gets shot down and Miles Teller goes to rescue him. In in Russia. They get downed and then they steal a Russian jet and fly back and they escape. I mean, it's crazy. You know, in the first one, they didn't talk about the enemies either, but it was the Cold War, so it was clearly Russia. They have red stars on there. Maybe they could be communist Chinese. But it's Russia. It's always Russia, and I find it very suspicious that in the midst of all this war in Ukraine and, you know, revamped tensions that, you know, the public isn't stupid. When they go see Top Gun Maverick, maybe they don't know that it's Russia, but they have to internalize it somehow. Enemies, the other, people who aren't Americans wrecking the world, so we have to come in and stop their nuclear production. But we're the ones who wreck the world. You know, what has Russia done in the past, you know, since the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union? What has it done? What has it really done? Like invading Georgia and I don't know. It's not Czechoslovakia. It's some other Chechnya, small little, you know, strange countries on its periphery. But the U.S. has engaged in global wars all across the whole Earth, across the entire Earth, from fucking with elections in South America to supporting drug cartels there to having a huge sway on Canada to funding all of Europe and their military, protecting them in a sense. Really what we're doing is using our military as leverage to get what we want from them, which I guess now the war in Russia is oil. But we want them to buy our oil instead of Russian oil. I mean, the war in Afghanistan, we surround China. There are lots of rumors about China and taking over, and there's a Chinese weather balloon. But our Navy covers their entire country. So it's a lot of Hollywood movies don't really talk about the actual geopolitical situations or the ramifications of having certain ideas. You know, I'm all for peace and stopping the global wars, and it seems like the U.S. is the one who perpetrates all those. I'm not saying China and Russia would be a great place to live. It's probably a horrible place to live. That's why so many people, immigrants, come to the United States to seek freedom and whatever. But they're not the ones who go around the earth, you know, starting global wars. There are tiny things like Russia killing that Russian guy in England. They like poisoned him and he died in an airport. Is crazy. Or they tried to poison him. Alexander Navalny. I think there are multiple people that happened to. The Chinese, what they do is they have little spy stations in North America and probably throughout Europe where they try to convince, you know, Chinese to come back and stand trial in China for disparaging the Communist Party. I mean, it sounds crazy. It's like some insane shit out of 1984. But then the United States, the Navy covers the entire Earth. We're the ones who basically have our thumb on the pulse of the Earth and kind of decide what happens. I mean, the wars in the Middle East, I assume that they're ending, the war on terror. You know, we still have that genocide in Yemen. We still have the war in Yemen that we're supporting. But Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, you know, Israel and Palestine, all these places, they seem fucked up, but there's no U.S. The U.S. isn't there to engage in war. But they were for 20 years. I mean, that's where I grew up. I was 6 when 9/11 happened. I was living in New York. I was in Manhattan the day that 9/11 happened. And it's over. 23 years, you know, Donald Trump wanted to pull out of Afghanistan, which I thought was great. I'm not a huge Trump fan, but you have to admit that everybody probably felt that the war in Afghanistan was terrible. and totally unnecessary. Joe Biden actually pulled them out and then gets us, right back into a war with Ukraine, and right back into a war with Russia. Which I don't know how you feel, but supporting other countries in times of war seems a good thing until you realize that, you know, if a million Russians died and a million Ukrainians died, would it be worth it? Is sovereignty worth the loss of life of millions of people? I guess it is. I mean, Russia's already lost 100,000 troops. I assume Ukraine has lost just as many. And I'm all for sovereignty and fighting for your own country. I wouldn't expect people from other countries to want anything different. Why would you want anything different? It's your home, it's your culture. But the point is that the U.S. is the one funneling guns and weapons around the globe, and then we have Top Gun Maverick come out. That's almost pretending like it's not as big of a deal as it really is. The U.S. to go on missions, you got to blow up this nuclear facility. But my God, we're the ones who do all these things. I think that Top Gun 2 really, it just slips, it mentally slips under the radar of Americans. I don't know how other people feel. I don't even know if Top Gun 2 got released in Europe. I mean, I'm sure it did. I don't know if it got released in China or India or other places like that. But you have to imagine that when foreigners see, non-Americans see that movie, they have to go, well, America is. Sure, it was cool, but God, those guys really fuck things up all the time for everybody. They're the dominators of the earth. I'm an American. We're the dominators of the earth. I don't really understand why. I mean, I do. After World War II, when every other country was destroyed, America basically got to decide how to rebuild the world. And here we are with Top Gun Maverick, where we're so caught in an adversarial relationship, or we want to put that narrative forward because it's such an easy narrative, us versus them, when reality is way more complex than that. You have an us versus them simple narrative, but you can fit into a 2-hour Hollywood movie with Tom Cruise doing crazy stunts, flying jet planes. They sing, a bunch of young people sing Jerry Lee Lewis's Great Balls of Fire, which I like Jerry Lee Lewis, but I don't know a lot of people who would know the lyrics to Great Balls of Fire. It's like some weird. The culture is stagnant. It's a stagnant culture. It seemed like Marvel movies were new and fun, but at the end of the day, they're just a big CGI mess, and they're just on the way out. It feels like maybe not for foreign markets, but maybe for America they're on the way out. But Top Gun 2, I imagine they'll just keep making these sort of military movies. I mean, nobody wants to go see the depressing war movies, even though All Quiet on the Western Front was nominated at the Oscars. That was a Netflix release. And as a Netflix release, anybody can see it. You sit in your home. It's almost better because they don't have to, go out of their way to go see a movie. Well, as much as I love movie theaters, All Quiet on the Western Front, which I didn't see. I imagine it's, very dark. The stories of Germans fighting on the Eastern Front, the worst theater of war in human history. I think that it's a good. People like it. The critics like it. But big box office releases, that's the interesting part. Would people go see All Quiet on the Western Front if it had a mass release and people go to the theaters to see the horrors of war? Maybe, but they certainly enjoyed Top Gun 2. They certainly enjoyed the military nonsense. They certainly enjoyed Val Kilmer's got throat cancer and he's typing out his messages. I think the movie shot beautifully. That scene, especially, was very very cool. I'm glad they didn't give Val Kilmer a fake voice or CGI him to make him, not fucked up. But they kept it. But it's all like some strange distraction. It's all a mirage to put in front of your eyes to make you feel for service members in the military when the government doesn't even care about service members of the military. I'd like to see, Top Gun 3, where Val Kilmer's denied his healthcare coverage, and Goose's son has PTSD. He just can't. The VA just won't give him coverage because they claim that his mental disorders have nothing to do with his military service. That would be a more realistic Top Gun 3 that I would love to see. I don't think is going to happen. I've never seen Born on the 4th of July, but I assume the same kind of way. They show that was Tom Cruise too. I think veterans are fucked up. No matter what global war, no matter what the effort, no matter what the enemy, people just come home fucked up and they drink themselves to death, or they kill themselves, or they beat their wives, or they do fucked up shit and commit crimes. The veterans, they get shafted. I'm a fan. I think we should have universal health care in this country, but maybe we roll it out incrementally in a small way. Give it to veterans. I don't really like the military as much as a nice person, but God, you have these poor black, brown, white, Asian, whatever, all just poor people from all over the country, even from Mexico. You can serve in the military without even being an American citizen. Think about that way. You can serve in the military without being a citizen, and then once you get out of the military and you're fucked up from shooting a bunch of kids in a village or destroying a hospital that you thought wasn't a hospital for some reason, you go home fucked up. You don't even get to be an American citizen. You don't get free health care for the rest of your life, which you should, at least through the military. The military, people like to pretend that we have patriotism in the military. Oh, they're so cool. You're a real American. You support the troops. The military is the biggest socialist organization in the entire country. You sign up, they pay you, they give you a place to stay, they give you a stipend, they give you, you have to buy some stuff, but they pay you and you have no expenses, especially if you're overseas. I mean, what's the real message of Top Gun 2 Maverick? That's what I want to ask. What's the real message? Honestly, is it family? Is it friends? Is the message of Top Gun 2 Maverick, if you just stick together and be a man and have resolve, everything will work out? Sure it is. But there's the geopolitical thing. It has geopolitical themes, which, it's all encompassing. It can't be ignored. Maybe the average person doesn't understand a lot of these things, but how could you not be curious after seeing a movie about the U.S. military? I've read a story about the first Top Gun where they were on a ship, and I think the sun was setting, and the director Tony Scott said like, "Oh, I want to turn the ship around, and we'll film it. We'll film a specific shot that I want to get. Let's do it." And he approached the captain of the ship, and the captain of the ship said something like, "For every minute that we're off course, because they got to be on the ship, kind of as an attaché to the military, not telling them what to do, or the Navy telling them what to do." And the captain said something like, "I could turn the ship around, but every minute is going to cost you like $15,000 or something." I think Tony Scott paid out of his own pocket to get a specific shot. I mean, that's crazy. What that has to do with the military, I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but there's so many intricate little things when you have Hollywood and the military. It seems like movies and Hollywood are all fun and games until you really start studying them and looking behind the scenes and seeing, God, it's a crazy industry. It really is an insane industry. Imagine being on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and every minute is $15,000 when you turn this giant warship around. Imagine how many minutes. I mean, $15,000. I don't even have that much money. If you were on the thing, Tony Scott, obviously, brothers with Ridley Scott, you imagine there's a big cash flow. They're legacy people. But, God, 15 grand to turn the boat around. It's wild stuff. It's not just point and shoot a camera and light some people, although it could be. It mostly seems like some strange boondoggle. You know what? Is that just Hollywood giving money to the military? Oh, every second we turn this boat around is $15,000. That just sounds like Hollywood funneling money to the Navy. I mean, it's crazy. There's a story of a guy named Fat Leonard. He's a Malaysian Malaysian business tycoon, I think, who's under arrest now, and he has kidney cancer. And he told all this because he has cancer and wanted to get it out there. He ran harbors or ports in Malaysia and found out that if he catered to the U.S. Navy, they would get so much more money because of those guaranteed military contracts. So it turns out that Fat Leonard, to get these Navy ships, he would get them hookers and have nice dinners, and so all the Navy people with some quartermasters or whatever, I don't know who the fuck dictates where the ships dock and stuff, but he convinced them to come to his harbors and his docks because he got them hookers and dinner. Who wouldn't want hookers and dinner? I want hookers and dinner. That'd be wonderful. Imagine you're in the Navy on a boat all day. Imagine how miserable you'd fucking be in the middle of the Pacific Ocean for a month or something. And then this Malaysian guy is bribing you with hookers and champagne and drugs. It'd be awesome. Turns out the the wife of one of the admirals on the ship found out that he was like cheating on her, so she confronted the military or the Navy, the higher ups of the Navy with it. She found out about the Fat Leonard scandal because he was like fucking hookers or something. Got mad and confronted the Navy. They fired him and a couple other admirals. But I think it was in a Vice documentary. I think they said if they had really gone after everybody involved in the Fat Leonard scandal, then they'd have to arrest or fire all the top people in the Navy. I assume that goes for the Marines, maybe the Air Force. I haven't like that's think about it. Think about it that way. Think about all of the money that they used to dock in Malaysia to have hookers at cocaine parties. I think years ago the CIA got caught in like Brazil or something having hookers and cocaine parties. These people aren't even spending our money on things you could rationally explain as like military expenses. Oh, more uniforms or better boots for the soldiers or healthcare. No, they're buying hookers and having lunch, which is the American dream, really, is to do as little work as possible, have as many hookers and as much free lunch as your boss can pay for. And I mean, their boss, we're not their boss. We're their tax money slaves. They take our money and they buy hookers and lunch with it. Okay, I want hookers and lunch, but it's illegal for me to get hookers and cocaine. Yet the CIA and the Navy can get as much hookers and cocaine as they want. I mean, how that wraps back to Hollywood, you have to imagine that it's some sort of strange money laundering scheme where Boeing and Raytheon put out this movie, and then Hollywood execs funnel money to them, and then they release it in theaters, and some more money goes back to them, and maybe they don't even need money. Maybe the guys at Boeing and Raytheon just gave money to Hollywood executives to make them look good in a fun action movie. People like the Avengers. How about the real Avengers? Tom Cruise is a fighter jet. It's ridiculous. Nobody talks about it. There's not a single person talking about it. All the political people, Joe Rogan, Jimmy Dore, love them all. Russell Brand, they talk about really interesting stuff. But nobody talks about Top Gun 2 Maverick. In my opinion, the most insane movie I've seen in my life because of how normal it was. I've seen crazy stuff. Visitor Q by Takashi Miike. The guy's fucking a corpse. His son is lying in a pool of breast milk on the floor. That's an insane movie. And Top Gun 2 is even crazier. Just because of how normal it was. They have there's a lot of, woke SJW stuff. And in that movie, they have, like, black pilot, white pilot, another white blonde pilot, girl, Latina pilot. It's all different races, which makes sense, but at the same time, they're trying to recruit you into the military. They're trying to get you to be a pilot. Which I knew a guy when I worked at when I lived back on the East Coast. I knew a guy who, I don't know what he's doing now, but he wanted to be a military fighter pilot. I love Mobile Suit Gundam, and I always wanted to be a mobile suit pilot. And then I met this guy. He's a tall Jew. I'm a Jew too, so I can say Jew. I'm not practicing, but he's a tall guy, is handsome with big, broad shoulders, and he's intelligent, and he wanted to go be a fighter pilot. And I asked him why, and he said, "Oh, I grew up playing video games and playing Black Ops and Call of Duty, and I just wanted something stimulating." Think about that for a second. He wants to be a fighter pilot because it's stimulating. What do fighter pilots do? Don't they blow up buildings? Don't they shoot people? I listened to a Tim Dillon podcast. He's talking about the Blue Angels. It's very funny. And he said, aren't the Blue Angels like the worst war criminals we've ever had? Like all retired Vietnam fighter pilots, guys who firebombed the jungles of Cambodia. I mean, fighter pilots, it's so cool. It's such a cool idea. What I said when I love Gundam, the idea of being in a machine and controlling it and flying through the air, all the freedom you must feel. But is freedom at the expense of your morality, your inner conscience? What happens if, that guy I knew, he was so nice. What happens if he blows up a hospital and can't deal with it and he goes crazy and shoots his family and shoots himself? What if that happens? I mean, that would be such a shame. Such a bright young man swayed by the seductive power of stimulation. It's more stimulating to fly a plane and shoot people or shoot down other planes. And I'm not one of those anti-military guys. I think we need the military, and every country needs their own military to protect their borders and their sovereignty. But it's very obvious that the U.S. has seen that their sovereignty depends on their domination of the entire planet. And what's the best way to get people on your side? That has nothing to do with the military. You can send people guns and weapons in other countries and have leverage. Just make a movie that makes it look good. Tom Cruise looks cool. He's got this dyed black hair that doesn't look real at all. He's a 55-year-old fighter pilot he's the best in the world, so he's got to be the one who comes in and shows the young kids how to fly. He ends up flying in the mission at the end. I mean, of course it's unrealistic as a movie, but goddamn, Tom Cruise is just on board. I don't know. Imagine, I would love to work in movies. That would be the ultimate dream. But you have to imagine that there's a level you get to where the money really starts coming in, Fat Leonard style. Fat Leonard comes on in, well, the proverbial Fat Leonard, and he says, "Hey man, you make a movie with me, you've got all the hookers and cocaine and dinner you could ever want. Not to mention cash, a nice apartment in Malibu, maybe a really nice place in the Hollywood Hills on Los Feliz. Oh, that'd be pretty sweet. Who wouldn't take that deal?" But God, to be allied with the worst war criminals on the entire planet, fused with financial criminals. I mean, I was watching an episode of Red Letter Media. It was called the Bruce Willis Fake Movie Factory. Now we know that Bruce Willis has aphasia, and that's why he put out all these horrible movies. He was just trying to get as much money as possible for his family, probably, because he's mental disease. He can't speak anymore or something. But in it, they talked about how the producer of the movie is some Russian guy with supposed ties to the mob, and he helped Martin Scorsese fund Silence, which I love. I think that's one of the most underrated, untalked about movies of all time. But, even a guy like Martin Scorsese couldn't get the funding for his movie without consulting some shady Russian characters who make terrible Bruce Willis movies. And who knows what else? Maybe some sort of financial criminal. It's a strange game. I think that, as fun as Top Gun is, the independent scene, something has to come out of the independent movie scene. Something. There has to be something. It's YouTubers. And I've watched the rise of YouTube my whole life, since 2007, and those Smosh guys. The YouTuber Joel Haver, he puts out consistent content that, to me, does feel like cinema. Cinema has that core of emotion or something. I don't know what the definition of cinema is, but it's what it is when you see it. A true movie fan knows what cinema is because they feel it in their soul. There's a wonderful scene in I don't remember his first name. Kihachi Okamoto. He made a movie called The Elegant Life of Mr. Everyman. And at the end, the whole movie's about him. He's a drunk salaryman. He's a salaryman who likes drinking and has a family, and he accidentally agrees to write a novel, and he does, and people love it. And the fame, it doesn't change him. He gets locally famous, and not in a good way. He gets locally famous, and when people want him to come speak, he drones on like an everyman. He doesn't have necessarily intelligent things to say. He has to release his heart and talks about everything and anything from the Olympics and Japan and his life and his family until he gets two people that don't want to really be there drinking at his home, and he gets drunk and starts talking about how he can't forgive the old men in the military who made his Japanese brothers go off and die in war. He just can't forgive them, and he has his wife read a part of a book that was a letter addressed to a Japanese soldier from his sweetheart, talking about how, oh, I've never received a letter from you when you're coming home. I love you always. That's cinema. You can feel it. You can feel the effects, and maybe I'm not doing a good job of describing it. You have to go watch the movie. The cinema can't be described, I don't think. It has to be felt. And Top Gun 2 Maverick, a plane flying through the air? I mean, what's the emotional core? Goose's son, and he has a relationship with Goose's son. It was interesting to see him go through all these characters. He's like fucking some new girl who owns the military bar in Myanmar that he goes to. Miramar, I think Myanmar is a country. Miramar. And he, goes to see Val Kilmer, can't talk, and build a relationship with Goose's son and the other fighter pilots, and John Hamm, who's an instructor, or not an instructor, he's like a higher up who hires him or something like that. And that seems nice, but there's no real emotional core because Tom Cruise doesn't really have any problems. His problem is that he's 60, which that sounds so universal and human, but it doesn't. He doesn't seem. He doesn't. He's not a 60-year-old man who's trying to adjust to life. He's like a Hollywood movie star who's flying fighter planes. Easy. It was character. Maverick. I don't know his last name. Maybe that is his last name. Maybe it's his call sign. I don't know what Tom character's name in Top Gun is, but he has relationships with all these characters in the movies, yet he doesn't really have any problems. He's the best of the best, and he can't fly anymore because they kicked him out because he's too crazy. Maverick, you're too good at flying planes. We can't have you. You know the story. It's the oldest story. It's the Arnold Schwarzenegger story. It's the Stallone story. All the action hero stories. But it feels more like Steven Seagal. Something about Arnold and Stallone. I don't know why, but they're wonderful. There's something so wonderful. Maybe it's just the look of them, or maybe it's that they always face. There's always a flaw, not a flaw, but they're Jackie Chan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, two of my favorite action heroes. They're not at the end of the movie. They're always gonna win, but through the movie they kind of get humiliated. In Jackie Chan movies, there's like strange comedy that kind of shows you even though he's a serious fighter getting in serious situations, he's a little goofy. Arnold Schwarzenegger is almost the same thing. He's always getting thrown around, falling down stairs. All this goofy stuff in Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. Tom Cruise, it almost has no sense of humor. Not the dialogue wise, but character wise. The character Maverick, he may be cool, but there's no sense of humor to add to the character. So it's kind of like Boeing wanted to make a movie, or the US government wanted to repair their image in the public eye. So they hired, they said, let's bring back Top Gun. That worked so well the first time. And then they just made another one and kind of quickly threw a script together. People loved it. It was a very tight movie, but it was just dumb. It's just dumb. You walk away from it. What do you get? What do you get? What do you get when you walk away, when you come away from Top Gun Maverick? Do you get? You're supposed to want to join the military. Like there's so few movies have a specific end goal or idea that they want to convey to you. People always ask Stanley Kubrick, "What does the ending of 2001: A Space Odyssey mean?" And he doesn't tell. He doesn't say. People ask, "What's in the suitcase in Pulp Fiction?" to Quentin Tarantino. He doesn't say. He wants to know what other people think. What about Top Gun 2 Maverick? You're supposed to want to join the military afterwards, right? So few movies have some sort of sick agenda like that. I don't know. It's so weird. I think there are a lot of Fat Leonards out there. Fat Leonard I think is a great it's a great symbol that the American piggy bank has been bust open, and it's a free for all to see who can grab as much money as they can before the whole thing collapses. Which I don't know if it'll collapse, but you'd be pretty smart to try to take as much money out of that as possible. And these military contractor guys, I mean, they're the ones who run. Basically, they're the ones who run the government, right? It's not Joe Biden or all these people going, "Oh, we don't have any partners with Raytheon. They're just a company." Of course, it's like in China, they have like state control over all their companies. In the U.S., they don't have state control over Boeing. Boeing has control over the U.S. government. They released that shitty the 747. They're making a new one because they all were crashing a couple years ago. God, I remember when the pandemic first started. I was getting too high, smoking too much of that wonderful Pacific Northwest greenery. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna start investing in stocks. I think I bought one share of Boeing at 360 or something. The very next day, the pandemic happened and flights stopped, and I sold out at 280. And then all the 747s were crashing. I don't know what I was thinking. Just getting too high and buying stocks. I don't even know how to trade in the marketplace. I mean, this is the wild world. And it's just a wild, wild world. I think this podcast is fun. I'm having fun talking. I wonder if it'll grow. I wonder if in 10 years there'll be people listening to this podcast, like 7 people listening to this podcast. I think it's worth it to upload, but I don't know. I think these ideas about the military and Top Gun, I think they should be talked about more. I think more people should really be opening their eyes to the fact that the culture, entertainment we take in isn't so organic. It's not so organic. They didn't go, we're thinking about bringing back Top Gun. What do you folks think? Let's bring it back. Yeah, yeah. No, Tony Scott threw himself off a bridge and killed himself in the early 2000s. The military has been on a global war of conquest, of indirect conquest for 20, 30 years. And then Top Gun 2 comes out as a consequence of them wanting to fucking boost their image. I mean, Paramount, it's such an odd game talking about box office numbers. And let's put the military out of it for a second. Let's pretend that, people in charge of the military aren't, uh, members of some sort of apocalyptic cult who want to rain hell down on the planet. Let's pretend they don't exist. Let's just talk about box office numbers. I think Paramount was really struggling. Paramount's a classic company. They made so many wonderful little movies. And with the Marvel movies coming out, racking up $1 billion each showing, how the fuck are you supposed to compete? Disney is just going to buy you out if you don't have a way to compete. So they get Top Gun 2. It's their $1 billion movie. I don't know if it's their first in a while, but it was a pretty big moneymaker. Just think about that. What people want to see are is a reinvigoration of nationalistic pride, even though it's not what it's about. It is what it's about. There's no doubt about it. If you're watching stuff about U.S. military service members in a good light and they're all fit and young and attractive, it's what it is. They want you to join the military. They want you to have a good view of the military. I mean, but they don't give a shit. I remember when the January 6th stuff happened, they had all the members of the National Guard sleeping on the floor of the rotunda. They didn't even have chairs, they didn't have a cot. Just sleeping in parking garages. They don't give a shit about soldiers. They just want you to think they give a shit about soldiers. Because if you think they give a shit about soldiers, then, what's to stop you from donating to, like, ridiculous soldier charities? What's to stop you from wanting your son to sign up or showing people, having strange opinions like, oh, I think that we should bomb more countries for our freedom and our safety? It's crazy. For our freedom and our safety, we need to stop having movies like Top Gun 2 Maverick. Although, I guess they're big money makers. What do you want me to do? What am I supposed to do? I can't stop that. I guess you can only think about what's going on in your own life. You can only really focus on your local community, your area, and fixing yourself, and I guess not joining the military. But so many people are poor, and they just join the military because it's a way out. It's a way out of their poor life. They get prestige. I had a friend from back home who was a white trash. He was really intelligent. He was just white trash. Wore a Confederate flag, belt buckles, smoked and drank all the time. Gross teeth. Was broke. His family was broke, but he was intelligent. And he joined the military. And he got a NATO tattoo on his forearm. And he was a pure jingoist. He always said, my country, right or wrong. Even though he was much smarter than I am. He could talk circles around me with philosophy and the intricacies of the world. But he wasn't smart enough to see that he's joining one of the greatest terrorist organizations in the face of the planet. Maybe he'll be in Top Gun 3. I think I think the pitch for Top Gun 3 that I talked about before, that's gonna be a good one. That's gotta be a good one. Tom Cruise comes back, dick shot off, and they won't give him a new bionic dick. And his whole movie's about how his his bionic dick just won't. He gets a black market bionic dick. Why do I have to get this bionic dick? Shouldn't the government be the one paying for my new bionic dick? I don't know. I don't know. I think a lot of military movies. I love military movies. They highlight the horrors of war. But where's the line between highlighting the horrors of war and funneling money to the military? If I wanted to make a movie about the military, how much money would I have to give the military? So that's the weird underhanded thing. If you want to make a movie about the military, you gotta have gear, you gotta have tanks and planes and cars and military bases and hangars and all this stuff. You have to throw a little bit of money Uncle Sam's way if you want to use a hangar. I go back in my mind and try to think of all the movies that involve the military I've ever seen, and it's Forrest Gump and Jarhead, We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson. So many interesting little movies. And then you wonder, are these just all, even if they're not outright propaganda pieces, how much money are Hollywood studios just funneling to the military? As if our government doesn't funnel enough to the military. Almost $1 trillion every single year. And then the Pentagon and whatever, they don't know where past money goes. They have no idea. It's an open piggy bank. They just take whatever they want. I had a friend talk about Forrest Gump being a propaganda piece. Is it? Is Forrest Gump a propaganda piece? It's such a wonderful, strange little movie. He's an American everyman, but he's mentally retarded. That's like, that's the America that everybody aspires, everybody aspires to be rich and wealthy and successful and have so many fun stories. And Forrest Gump does that all, not necessarily in spite of his handicap, but almost because of his handicap. He's kind of just wanders through life and things roll off him. When he joins the military and Bubba gets killed and he rescues all the soldiers from the jungle. Is that propaganda? They don't show the Vietnamese. They don't show the enemy. But I don't know. There's something where you focus on a character and a person and include the military. It doesn't feel like propaganda. It feels earnest. It feels like the military is part of life, and this is part of his life. And it's such Vietnam War was so important, and Forrest Gump, glided through all the events of the '60s and '70s that you just have to assume Vietnam would have to be part of them. I never read the book, but I imagine Vietnam's in the book or some other war. The fact that Forrest Gump, I don't know. At the end always gets me. When he basically reveals he's not as mentally retarded as he seems. I don't. When Jenny says, "You don't know what love is," and he goes, "I know what love is," or when he asks, when he meets Jenny and he asks if his son also has AIDS or something. Like he's not stupid. He just glides through life. So I think Forrest Gump, is a better American and a better character than Maverick from Top Gun. He may be more handsome than Tom Hanks, but he certainly doesn't have. I love Tom Cruise as an actor, but he's a wacky Scientologist. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? He's part of some strange giant cult that their whole point of existence is just to steal people's money and buy real estate in Los Angeles, and just hold real estate, and put their money into real estate so it doesn't ever, it's inflation proof. You buy a humongous building in downtown LA, or many buildings, or own a McDonald's, or own a whatever. You just steal people's money and put it somewhere else. There's a Scientology center in Inglewood. If you go down Market Street, it's the barren. Half the businesses are shuttered, but it seems fine. There are restaurants, the black community, and lots of black people walking around enjoying the small restaurants and the small things that are there. 7 pawn shops. But then across the street in an impoverished neighborhood is the gleaming Scientology Center. The Scientology Center is the nicest building in Inglewood, besides the cemetery. The two nicest places I like Inglewood. I like it. I like it a lot. I've been living here for a little bit now, for a couple months. All the other Californians I talk to say it's dangerous, but I think you go down Crenshaw towards Compton, it gets dangerous. But where I am, it's fine. Over on the west side. But you go down Market Street and they have the Scientology Center. It's the nicest building in all of Inglewood. There's a guy out front in a vest, and it looks like a Barnes and Noble. But who the fuck is buying these books? Nobody. Nobody's buying L. Ron Hubbard Scientology books. It doesn't make any sense. It's a money laundering scheme. It's all money laundering. You have to think that there's no way that building sells enough things to fund the upkeep of the place. They just steal people's money by convincing them that the Thetans or the evil spirits are really the reason why you drink yourself to sleep every night, or hit your wife, or fucking are insecure. And they just put it back into these buildings that I don't want to even go in there. There's a guy with a vest who stands there, and they have parking meters that have 15-minute parking right in front, but it could be so many other things. I guess that's what worries me about Top Gun Maverick, is it just seems like what if it's just a money laundering scheme to get more money to the military? What if it was an awesome big movie? I mean, it is, but what if all the money just flows back up the pipeline straight to Boeing, straight to Raytheon, straight to, I grew up in the East Coast in Connecticut. That's like the submarine capital of the world. Connecticut is a quaint little boring state, but it turns out they're completely beholden to the military. They make the submarines, they make bullets. I think the Westchester or something, not Westchester, Westminster, some rifle, some Colt, I don't know. They made bullets somewhere in Connecticut, I think, but it's mostly submarines. And you go to movies, they'll take place in California. And they're funded from California. They don't necessarily take place here. But God, this place is a huge military area too. When I lived in Oxnard, they have the Port Hueneme military base up there. I roomed with a guy in the military. He was awesome. And he just drank himself to sleep every night. That's how fucked up is that? All these Hollywood movies. What if all these big movies are just money laundering schemes? Where do you get $250 million to fund a movie about Ant-Man? Paul Rudd is Ant-Man. Paul Rudd doesn't have $250 million. Maybe he does. It probably just comes from the military. Straight from the horse's. You're hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, okay? It comes from the military. I don't know that for sure, but every time you see a movie that costs $500 million, because when you see the Avengers, the budget says $250 million. That does not include marketing, which is another $200 million. That doesn't include distribution, getting it out to these theaters, and paying all the yes men and make work employees that don't really do anything. It's got to come from the military. I just have to assume, after seeing the excitement for Top Gun 2 Maverick, It just opened my third eye, as Bill Hicks would say, unsqueegee your third eye and see that we are completely beholden to not even a cult or a cabal or something, comically sinister like that. It's a bunch of rich people who make guns.